DeAmon Harges is the original roving listener. As a neighbor, church member, and staff person at Broadway United Methodist Church in Indianapolis, Indiana. His calling in life is as an artist in a wide variety of ways, including with people. This led him to being hired to do what he was already doing. Identifying the gifts, talents, dreams, and passions of his neighbors in order to build community, economy, and mutual delight. He continues that work today as a church member of Broadway and as a neighbor and as the founder and staff person for The Learning Tree, a business he has built with his neighbors that has taken him and others around the world to help people remember the ways in which community is present and powerful everywhere, particularly in places where people are pushed to the margins. Please welcome DeAmon.
Hello, everyone. Wow, that sounds good. I'm a little sick today, so bear with me. I was really touched by Judith Snow. She was a friend of mine. I'm married, but me and Judith went on a date, and we ate together. And on our date, she said to me that I think too small. It perplexed me for a minute because I just thought about what she was thinking about, and she was right. So this is a poem I'm going to dedicate to my friend Judith, to our friend Judith. Close your eyes for a second. We are rendered in this moment where we're caught in a manual time still. This is the very moment where we're caught suspended in love with one another. It is a place where light never fades and the vortex of sin only exists as dust beneath our feet. Way below friendships, miles below fellowship. Suspended in time as we're suspended in communion, fallen in love with one another. Fallen seemingly in time, in light, in joy, in love, in happiness, in joy. Rendered, rendered, rendered. You can open your eyes. Now, how many of us remember the first moment that we realized we belonged as a member of a community? Who do you have to thank for that? I'm going to start by thanking my grandparents, Alec and Marie Braylock. By the end of this story, you'll know why. In 2013, I spent a time in Thunder Bay, Ontario, working with a group of First Nations folk. We were there to talk about ABCD and do trainings how to make community better. I was there with my friend Mike Green. Now, ABCD isn't a training on the alphabet. It's asset-based community development. It was coined by my friend John McKnight and Jody Kretzman at the Institute in Chicago. It is where a community dares to support and foster the gifts of everyone in the life of the community. It is when they start with the glass half full rather than half empty, with the notion that every single person has a gift. So before we did the training, the First Nation elder got up to set context for the day. He said his name, and he said something more impactful after that. He said, "We are not here to build community, we are here to remember it." I was forever changed by the way he used that word, struck by the word remember. In fact, the etymology of that word began just meaning parts of a body. But by the 14th century in France, it meant being part of something whole. You see, that elder, I think he was trying to say that we're all members and we belong already. We just have to open our eyes to see it. I live 20 blocks northwest of Indianapolis, Indiana. It's a neighborhood that is rapidly changing, being gentrified. And the common narrative for most people on the outside and some on the inside is that we need fixing, that we're broke, and all that we value is charity. So in 2004, my journey to uncover the gifts and talents of every single person in the life of this community. Find places for those gifts to be utilized and celebrated in ways that build community, economy, and mutual delight. You see, people didn't think that we were sacred. But the examples of the things that I uncovered in the first 6 months in the 4-block radius around my house was that I uncovered 45 gardeners as I combed the alleys because I saw things growing. I wore out 3 pairs of shoes as I stumbled on the porch and discovered wonderful artists. I gained a little weight over the years because I got invited to the kitchens of the invisible cooks that nourish the community. You see, this becomes important. Again, no one thought we can do anything. So in 2004, I looked to increase my efforts. I stopped doing things alone. I stopped traveling alone, and I bring my neighbors. Actually, my neighbors done the photography. I created a business called The Learning Tree. I made my neighbors my business partners. Now, they didn't have to put money in at first, but they gave me all their social and networking capital. I bet y'all all know what that is, right? Friendships. They did trainings and had conversations around North America, and they make $150 an hour. In return, they give me 20% back, and we all give it back into what our neighbors are doing. So last year, we increased our efforts when a neighborhood organization called ROW, that means Returning Our Waterway, they were responsible for creating the ecology and keeping the ecology healthy around the canal in our neighborhood. That was a sign that things were rapidly changing in our neighborhood. We received about $67,000, and we told them we're going to take the money and then reinvest it back into our neighborhood, so we did. 85% of that money went to the hands of people in our neighborhood because our neighborhood is labeled low income, and no one ever thinks about money. They think about programs. They think about helping people, but no one thinks that people have capacity, so they will never invest money. So we took that money. And we invested in a few key things. We invested in the neighborhood staff. You just saw a little bit. Jamal, go back to the staff a little bit. So you have Maurice Broadus. We call him the dream catcher. He's a novel writer, and he writes portfolios of joy of our neighbors. And then my photographer friend, a hip-hop producer, Wild Style, he lives directly across the street. He's the roving illustrator. He's a hip-hop producer and a sound engineer, and he uses his gift to make the invisible visible. And then I got my friend Amanda Wolf. She's the executive spirit. She keeps us legal. She takes care of all the money things in our neighborhood, so we won't get in trouble. Then we have January York. She's the newest of us. She's the animator of the human spirit. She's the healer. But her job is not to do the healing. Her job is to gather the healers in our neighborhood that are already doing the healing so that they can have support. And then you have me, the administrative nightmare. We also found it important to invest in neighborhood storytellers, like artists, poets, performing artists, visual artists. They help cultivate the stories. They can see things we couldn't. We invested in block parties. We discovered there was over 47 artists in a 4-block radius that took discarded materials. We invested in parties. So we actually gave our neighbors $300 to throw a party, and the only rule that you had is that it couldn't be obscene or illegal, and you had to have three or more people. The party that you see there and the party before was called Open Bite Night. It was a neighbor concept that came up. It was like open mic, but with food. 300 people showed up. This is in a neighborhood that people discarded. Again, no one thinks we're sacred. You know, I'm thinking back, you know, what is it that is gathering people together in our neighborhood? You know, is it a program? Is it money? It's just making a space for people. You know, we found that investing in parties, people became their truest self. Investing in artists gave us reasons to see what is visible in our neighborhood worth investing in. It also takes a structure. Now, my friends would laugh at me when I say this because I'm seemingly the most random person in the world. But I heard my friend Dave Matthews at Kettering Foundation, now not Dave Matthews of the Dave Matthews Band, but the former president of the University of Alabama. He was talking about structures in forms of blobs versus squares. You know, to me, it was sounding like amoebas versus skeletons. But he was describing how we use square structures in systems to do complex things. And after all this time, those systems keep failing. But those type of structures are good for building buildings. They're good because they're not flexible. We wouldn't want a flexible structure thing to happen with this. I would be afraid to be standing right now, right? They have schematics. They're very predictable. Now, the blob structures, on the other hand, are structures that are fallible, movable, kind of like amoebas. They change. They're seemingly unpredictable. They make space for when things are working. They discard things when they don't. Kind of like the natural nature of human beings. I think to have this type of structure, there's a few key you must have. And one of that is a commitment to 100-year work. 100-year work ensures that this work will keep going after I'm gone. My daughter is here. Come here, Dejanay, for a second. She didn't know I was going to do that. This is why we commit to 100-year work. Thank you. She's already is following what her grandparents have done. So I'm thinking, what has inspired me to do this work? Why do I have so much passion for this work? I know it's not my formal education because I never graduated from high school. I think I can pin this moment back down to the stories that used to run through my house about this legendary tree. Now, my grandfather raised my mother and their siblings in South Bend, Indiana. It was on the west side of I was on the west side. It was where the Kankakee River flowed underground. It was also where the hospital dumped their biohazard. But my grandfather planted a tree, and when my mother got old enough, they ended up gathering around the tree in times of crisis. And when my grandfather would leave, after they would leave the tree, he would say, "Remember, life is abundant." The young people called that tree the learning tree. You see, nobody else treated them as they were sacred. But my grandfather made space for what was important. They made space for everybody's gift to contribute. They cultivated those type of structures that First Nation elders said. Those amoebas, they remembered.